All right, let's get right into it. Peace talks between the US and Iran are pretty much on the verge of complete collapse. We're talking about a fragile ceasefire that's just about to expire. The rhetoric is getting hotter by the minute, and one side has made a very, very clear threat about what happens if all this diplomacy fails. And that's not just speculation. That stark warning, it comes directly from US President Donald Trump. I mean, it's about as blunt an assessment as you can get of what's at stake as this crucial deadline approaches, and it really captures the tension hanging over this whole situation. So, how did we get to this point? Well, it all starts with the temporary truce that's been holding everything together. So let's start there, with that fragile ceasefire. The clock is absolutely ticking on this. This 2-week pause in hostilities, it was meant to create some breathing room for a second round of peace talks, which were all set to happen in Pakistan. But with Wednesday's deadline coming up so fast, that window for diplomacy is slamming shut. And if you were hoping they might just buy a little more time, well, that optimism has been pretty much dashed. President Trump himself has come out and said that an extension to the ceasefire is highly unlikely. You know, that kind of pessimistic outlook from the White House sets a really tense backdrop for these negotiations before they even have a chance to start. But it wasn't just the deadline. There was one specific incident that pushed things even closer to the edge, creating a real flashpoint right in the Strait of Hormuz. This right here is the event that threw a massive wrench into the works. Just days before the talks were supposed to resume, the U.S. seized an Iranian ship near the strait. And what was the response? Well, officials in Tehran immediately threatened to just boycott the peace talks altogether. And you gotta understand, the location here is absolutely key. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just some random body of water. It is one of the world's most vital shipping lanes. It's a critical artery for global trade. So this standoff is happening in a place that affects everyone, which is exactly why it's become such a central and contentious part of these talks. So as tensions were rising on the water, the public statements from both sides got more and more hostile. It really ignited a war of words. So here's that quote from President Trump again, but in its full context. He was asked by PBS News what would happen if Iran just decided to skip the talks. And his response was incredibly direct. The message couldn't be clearer. The U.S. is prepared to walk away from the table and pivot straight to military action. Iran's response? It was just as defiant. Their top negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, stated flatly that Iran will not negotiate under duress. And then he issued his own counter-threat, warning that if the war resumes, Iran has some new cards of its own to play on the battlefield. And this really gets us to the core of the problem, the diplomatic impasse. On one side, you have the U.S. threatening bombs. On the other, Iran is threatening new cards. Both sides are just digging in their heels, turning what could have been a negotiation into a very public showdown. So what's really driving this hardline stance from Iran? It's worth taking a moment to explore the view from Tehran. Well, according to one Iranian official, it's not just one thing. They point to the ongoing U.S. blockade and, of course, the aggressive public tone from President Trump. There's also this issue of what they're calling his public maximalism, this belief that the U.S. is basically demanding everything and offering nothing in return. From where they're sitting, it doesn't feel like a negotiation. It feels like an attempt to force them to a table of surrender. And it seems they're not the only ones who feel that way. The mediators over in Pakistan, the ones actually trying to broker this peace deal, have reportedly cautioned the Trump administration about its harsh public language. They see this kind of talk as a direct threat to the very diplomatic process they're trying so hard to salvage. So, when you put all of this together, it leads us to a situation that is more precarious than ever. Both sides really do find themselves right on the brink. And this is where we stand right now. That deadline is just hours away. The threats are escalating daily, and those planned peace talks in Pakistan are hanging by a thread. Diplomacy is clearly faltering, and the alternative seems to be a very swift return to open hostility. So it all comes down to this one question, doesn't it? As the path to a peaceful solution gets narrower and narrower, the choice seems to be between two very different and, frankly, very dangerous outcomes. The entire world is watching to see which one, new cards or bombs, is going to define what happens next.